Okay, the backstory with the Roy Moore sexual assault allegations, of course, four accusers of Roy Moore, one of them under Alabama's age of consent. She was 14 years old, the age of consent 16 years old. Now, there have been some defenders and some doubters, people saying things like, hey, three of these four would have been legal anyway, which is kind of a weird way to defend child sex assault in my mind. But we now have another accuser that has come forward, and this one is not saying that she was involved in a consensual situation with Roy Moore. Beverly Young Nelson of Alabama is accusing Roy Moore of sexually assaulting her when she was 16 years old. If true, this would be two instances of unwanted sexual contact with Roy Moore. She was a waitress at the old Hickory House. Moore would come in. Moore offered her a ride home when her boyfriend was running late, and instead of actually driving her home, she says Moore drove her behind the restaurant, parked the car, and sexually assaulted her without consent while she struggled and protested. Her lawyer, Gloria Allred, says that she's willing to answer questions about this incident under oath. And of course, the fact that Gloria Allred is involved immediately is setting off the right. They are saying, Gloria Allred is a bomb thrower. She's leading a witch hunt. She's responsible for the millions of abortions that have taken place because of her support for Roe v. Wade. Can you imagine? Beverly Nelson Young can't be believed about her allegations against Roy Moore because her lawyer believes that abortion should be legal and was an activist for that cause 40 years ago. Guys, he admitted to dating 16-year-olds while he was in his 30s. He's been against statutory rape laws as a judge. Is it crazy to think that a 32-year-old who dates 16-year-olds would try to be with a 14-year-old and maybe try to pull a fast one on a 16-year-old by driving her behind the restaurant? And we have also learned that Roy Moore was banned from a local mall. I don't know where this is going to bottom out. Roy Moore apparently would go hang out at the Gadsden Mall in Alabama. He was a regular there, kind of like a mall rat or something. He would hang out there, and multiple people told the New Yorker that he would be there alone and was ultimately banned from the mall because he was badgering teenage girls, which just sounds about right. It's all part of the exact same thing that we've been hearing. So the only question I have is Roy Moore going to resign? We've heard from a number of Republicans now that it's time for Roy Moore to step aside. And really, the reason I'm not optimistic that this is actually going to destroy his election chances are that in the end, the president of the United States was accused by a dozen or more women of sexual assault, including a 13-year-old girl, right? Can the so-called moral majority Christians admit that they don't really care about their so-called family values? What they care about is winning elections in order to impose their Christian worldview on everybody else. If we can get them to admit that, because that's what a lot of them are thinking, we might understand why this still might not signal the end for Roy Moore. And we will ultimately see what happens. Moore is being hurt in the polls. We talked about that yesterday. He is being asked, implored to resign, even by some Republicans, but I don't know that he will. And we'll continue following it. We'll see if more allegations surface.